X12-837 healthcare claim transaction, the backbone of healthcare information exchange and the most critical and intricate transaction set. I know many of you have been eagerly waiting for this final session where we'll decode the remaining key segments of this powerful file. If you followed the previous two sessions carefully, you are now just steps away from mastering this X12-837 transaction set. So let's pick up where we left off. Hi, I'm Manmeet Chadha. Welcome to Health Tech Decoded, where you get answers to all your queries related to healthcare technology. As we already know, 837 files can be professional, institutional, or dental. For these 837 files, in Chapter 1, we did loops 1000A, 1000B, 2000A, 2000B, and 2000C. In Chapter 2, we did loop 2300 and all segments under it. Today, in Chapter 3, we are doing loop 2400 for the service lines in a claim. Example, you visit a hospital after experiencing a fall. As part of the treatment, the doctor checks you, an X-ray is conducted, and a plaster is applied. These are billed as separate service lines in the claim. These lines are what we will focus on today. After today's session, you can very confidently handle any of these three 837 transaction sets because we'll be wrapping up the entire set today. So do stay tuned to master this most complicated X12 file type. These are the segments that we'll talk about. Loop 2400, the service line number loop. This loop carries a segment for stating the actual service line number, which is represented by LX, followed by the number of service line being referred to. The service line details are represented by SV1, SV2, or SV3. Professional service lines is represented by SV1, institutional service lines by SV2, and dental service line is represented by SV3. These two segments, the NX and the SV segments, they are mandatory segments for service lines. Now the professional service line, that is SV1 for 837P. SV101, it carries the information for the medical procedure that is performed. SV101 is further divided into various components. First component has the qualifier to represent the service type. It can have various values like ER, HC, IV, WK, as you see here on the guide. But under the HIPAA guidelines, we only use the code HC, which represents both CPT and HCPCS code sets. If you want to understand what HCPCS and CPT codes are, and how do they differ? You can refer to one of my earlier sessions here. I have the link here below. The second component in SV101, it carries the procedure code for the service. Then come a few occurrence of modifiers that can be used while performing a service. Modifiers are two-letter codes that provide more precise information about the service or the procedure performed as part of the service line. So for example, if there is a line for blood work that is for complete blood count, some modifiers like TC or 26 can better explain if only the lab was involved or even any professional interpretation was done. TC indicates only lab involvement. 26 indicates that a professional was also involved in analyzing the report. Then SV102, it carries the line item charge. SV103 has the measurement codes. The measurement codes can be MJ for minutes and UN for units. SV104 has the actual unit count. SV105, it has the place of service. We have already seen the various place of service codes when we did CLM05 segment in Chapter 2. You can please refer to the list of codes from there. Then comes the segment for pointing to the diagnosis codes for the particular service line that is in question. This goes in SV107, which is divided into multiple elements for pointing to like various different diagnosis codes if required. The first element of SV107, it's a pointer to the primary diagnosis for that particular service line. Second element onwards, the diagnosis codes pointed are in the order of importance to that line. For example, in this file, you see SV10701 value for different lines. For some lines, the primary diagnosis is 1, which points to the principal diagnosis code of this claim 4779. For one line, the primary diagnosis in SV10701, it's 2, which points to the next diagnosis of the claim, which is 2724. For some lines, SV107 points to multiple diagnosis pointers, as you see here. Next, let's discuss the institutional service line represented by SV2. SV201, it carries the value for revenue code. Revenue code is utilized in 837 institutional claims because that's where mostly admissions happen. Revenue code identifies the specific service or department a patient received care in, such as room and board or laboratory services. Revenue codes are often used in conjunction with CPT and HCPCS codes to provide a complete picture of the patient's treatment. Then, just like we discussed in SV 101 for 837P claims, SV 202 carries the information for the medical procedure being performed as part of this line. This is further divided into various components. First component has the qualifier to represent the service type. We've already seen these qualifiers in the SV1 segment, so it's exactly the same here. Then the second component, it carries the procedure code for the service, and then follow the modifiers used while performing the service. SV203, it carries the line item charge. SV204 has the measurement codes. The measurement codes here can be DA for the number of days or UN for units. SV205 is the actual unit count value. Then SV207, it carries the line-specific non-covered charges. For example, if total line service charge is $2,600.39 and the non-covered charge in SV207 is $600, it means that the insurance company does not cover these $600 and the patient should pay that amount. Then for 837D claims, the service line is represented by SV3. It is very similar to SV1, but it has a couple minor differences. SV301, it carries the medical procedure ID. 301 is further divided into various components. First component has the qualifier, which will always be AD, which stands for American Dental Association. The second component carries the procedure code for that particular dental service, then a few occurrences of modifiers that can be used while having that service. SV302 carries the line item charge. SV303 has the place of service. Again, you can check chapter 2 for various place of service codes. Then come the segments for identifying one or more areas of oral cavity. That is SV304 segment. It describes the general area or region of the oral cavity. Example, the codes to represent upper right quadrant is 01, upper left quadrant 02, code for upper anterior or the front tooth, it's 05. Then SV305, it specifies the code for placement status of dental work. Example, I for initial placement, R for replacement. SV306 carries the count of the number of procedures for this line. SV311, it points to one or multiple diagnosis codes for this line. This pointing is exactly how we already discussed for SV1 segment in 837P claims. Then there's an optional segment for supplemental or extra information that can support the line item here. This is represented by the PWK segment. It's a way to provide information about what extra details like reports, x-rays are being shared with the claim. In chapter 2, we already saw the different code types that can be used in PWK01. I will not go into the types again. You can please refer to chapter 2 for those code types. But here, as you see, we have used PWK01 equal to OX or DB. OX stands for Oxygen Therapy Certificate. DB for Durable Medical Equipment Certificate. I will further talk about these two when we understand the therapy begin date for DTP 463. For 837D, we have a segment for tooth information in the service line loop. This is the TOO segment. It is required when the tooth number or the tooth surfaces are to be mentioned in the dental service line. The qualifier code in TOO 01 is always JP, which stands for Universal National Tooth Designation System. In TOO 02, we have the tooth code value. Here on my screen, you see the universal tooth code values that can be used. T0003 segment will carry one or multiple tooth surface code values. All options of tooth code values are here as you see in the guide. Then a few important date segments that are used in 2400 service line loop. Many of the date segments here are the same as we have already discussed in chapter 2. DTP segment with qualifier 472 for service date, we have already discussed in chapter 2 for dental claims. In 2400 loop, this date type is used in all professional, institutional and dental claims. Then the initial treatment date with qualifier 454. We have already discussed this in chapter 2 for 837P claims. Here in line level loop also, it's used for 837P claim files only. Then for 837P files, we can also use the date segment for last seen date. It has a qualifier 304. So DTP star 304. This date is more useful when there are routine visits happening for a certain treatment. The therapy begin date, it's represented by qualifier 463 in DTP01. This is required when the claim has to mention the begin date of a particular therapy or treatment, like the oxygen therapy or any durable medical equipment use therapy. This DTP segment is required when supplemental information in the form of a certificate is submitted via the PWK segment. We just discussed the PWK segment above for such certificates. Then the prescription date is used when, as per prescription, any drug is billed as part of the line of service. It is represented by DTP star 471. Then for dental claims, we already learnt about appliance placement date with qualifier 452 in the last chapter. The same can also be used at line level. Then dental treatment start and completion dates are represented by qualifiers 196 and 198 respectively. The treatment start date examples can be initial impression taken for orthodontic treatments, crown or dentures, etc. And the treatment completion dates are required when reporting the date on which the course of treatment was completed. When the treatment start and end dates are used, the date of service must not be used on the claim line. Then, just like we discussed in chapter 2, the various ref variants are used at line level also. These variants can be used in all types of 837 files as per requirement. Line item control number is represented by ref 6R. Line item control number is used for communication between different parties with respect to the particular line, and it's unique within a patient control number that was mentioned in CLM 01. Then ref G1, it carries the prior authorization ID, which we've already discussed, and here the prior authorization ID is with respect to the service line. Then just like we learnt about the repriced claim number in the last chapter, we also have the repriced line number. It's represented by ref 9B. This ref segment, if required, is shared by the repricing agency to the payer to identify the repriced line. Then the adjusted repriced line number. Again, just like we did at claim level, even at the line level, the repricer can do some adjustments and then identify the line using ref 9D. This segment is sent from the repricer to the payer. Any kind of note, if required to be exchanged at line level, it can be done with the NTE segment. The note reference code values that can be used here in NTE01 we already discussed in chapter 2. Now, claim and line repricing results are returned by repricers to payers via the HCP segments. HCP01 carries the method used while pricing. Various methods used you have already seen last time in the last session, so you kindly refer to those codes from there. HCP02 has the allowed amount for the provider, which is derived after repricing. And HCP03 has the savings made for the payer on this line. In cases where the repricer is unable to reprice the line, the HCP segment is returned like this, or it's returned like this. Some repricing companies return allowed amount equal to bill charge, like I have shown in 837P example here, or you see in 837I and D example, some may return with allowed and savings equal to 0 because no repricing happened. And HCP13 carries the rejection reason code. Service lines, they also carry the provider's information, just like at the claim level. If a particular service line on a claim was referred to by any specific provider, we can add the referring provider information at that service line. Operating physicians can be different for different lines of institutional claims in certain cases. Different services in a claim can be rendered by different providers, hence, rendering provider information can be different for all lines. Similarly, each service line can carry its own detail of the facility where the service was provided. Since I have already talked in detail about these providers and facility identifier codes and usage at claim level, I will not go into the detail here. Kindly refer to the chapter 2 for all the details around the provider and the facility identifier codes. Now, an important segment at line level is the line adjudication information. This segment is required when the claim has been previously adjudicated by the payer or when any kind of adjustment is applied to this line by any payer in case of multiple insurance companies involved. It's more used for the purpose of coordination of benefits. So this diagram here, it explains the use of SVD segment better. So you see this claim has loop 2320 that represents the other subscriber on this claim, then loop 2330 for the other insured and other payer information. Now, if the other payer has made a partial payment towards the line, SVD segment shows that with the payer ID in SVD 01, portion of the payment made in SVD 02, and the procedure code and modifier information based on which the adjudication took place, all that goes in SVD 03. This can be different from the submitted medical procedure code information. Then SVD 05, as you see here, it has the actual count of units as part of the adjudication process. SVD segment for 837I claims, it's slightly different because it has the revenue code information which goes in SVD 04. This kind of an information, obviously, because revenue codes are not part of 837P, SVD 04 in 837P files is null. Then SVD for 837D claims, it's just like the 837P, but it uses AD as the procedure code instead of HC. Then if SVD segment exists on any service line, the CAS segment should be available to explain the line adjustment code, reason, and the amount. As we already learned when we did chapter 2, the CAS segment is for adjustments, if any, from the prior or the main payer. This adjustment, it causes the amount paid to differ from the original charged amount. Here, this CAS segment in 2400 loop, it refers to the line level adjustments that are made. In chapter 2, we already saw the values that can go in CAS 01 segment and also the possible adjustment reason codes for CAS 02 segment. Then the SE segment is the transaction trailer. This marks the close of transaction set whose control number goes in SE02. SE01 has the total count of segments in this entire set. GE segment is the trailer for the functional group that was started with the GS segment and whose control ID goes in GE02. Again, GE01 has the count of the total transactions in this group. IEA, it marks the trailer or closure for the interchange file whose number is in IEA02. IEA01 is the total count of the functional groups in this file. These were all the segments that we had to cover for X12 837 files. Now let me also show you the 3 demo 837 files together so that you can easily compare how these segments are utilized there. Here you see the 837P, I and D files side by side to each other. We will focus on the service lines that we studied today. The SV1, SV2 and SV3 segments you see here. The SV1 is for professional and SV3, as we know, is for dental. They both are pretty similar to each other. The only difference is that SV3 segment, it uses AD instead of HC. The SV2 segment for 837I has revenue code and SV201. And then for line 1, you also see that SV207 is populated, which represents the non-covered charges in case of UB claims. Then for the P and I claim lines, you also see the line adjudication happening with the SVD segments. Then as a result, you'll see the CAS segments also existing there because SVD is there. And the CAS segment, as you already know, it mentions the adjustment group and the reason details. Then in the 837D file, you'll notice the TOO segment for information of the tooth that is being worked on. Here in 837D, you also see that there's a separate rendering provider information for line 2. This explains that line 2 of the dental claim was rendered by another provider due to some of the other reason and not by the provider who took care of line 1 and line 3 for this dental claim. Now with this we come to an end to the 837 transaction segments. I hope with all the 3 chapters you got enough clarity on possible ways the 837 files can be used. I will soon return with other important extra transaction sets and lots of more important healthcare tech content. If you don't want to miss out on that information, do hit the subscribe button.